So our form seems to be working pretty well so far, and we have validation for only one field, and again, you can add all the validation you want. It should be pretty straightforward at this point. So it would seem that we could go back to our back-end code, and I'm looking at moviehandlers.go, and go to the edit movie function, and it would seem that all we'd have to do at this point is capture the JSON, read it into the movie struct, and then write the necessary code to put it in the database. And that's not quite true, but let's give it a try and see what happens here, okay? So I'll put the code right here, right at the beginning of the function. So the first thing I'll do is declare a new variable, var, and I'll call it movie, and it's of type models.movie, right there. And then just read in my JSON from my request. So error is assigned the value of json.newDecoder. And we want to decode the body of our request and decode it into our movie variable. And check for an error. And I'll just copy this error code right here and paste it up here and change this assign to an equals so we get rid of that error. And if that worked properly, I should just be able to go log.println and read movie say title and print that to the console. So let's see what happens. I'll stop my application and start it up and go back to my web browser and open my JavaScript console, and I'll clear this out and go to home and then back to the add movie page and put in I'll just put in dummy data. Test title. The release date will be any valid date. The runtime will be 100 minutes. I'll choose PG for an MPA rating, give it a 4 for stars, and some text for the description. And I'll save this. And you'll see we get an error here, bad request. Now, why is this a bad request? Well, it doesn't seem to make much sense. Let's go back and add one more line to our code here and see what's going on. So we'll do a log.println, and we'll just print out the error. So I'll stop my application, start my application, and this time I'll put some blank lines in here so I can see the error message. And I'll just re-save this and get the same bad request error. And there it is, bad request. But it is posting the necessary JSON. But here we have the error, parsing time, and that's the date that we're getting out of the JSON. And we can't parse it. So there's something wrong here. And actually, there'll be even if we fix that error, if we went back here and look at the actual posted JSON, if you look closely, you'll see that ID is being passed as a string. In fact, everything is being passed as a string. Now, how are we going to fix that? Well, we have a few options. We could go back to our front-end code, and instead of just grabbing all of the form fields as in one line of code, we could manually construct the JSON in the correct format. But that would be a pain. What if we have to have this same form in a different handler somewhere else? Well, that's a bit of a problem because that's an awful lot of code duplication, and it seems to me that that's a lot of code to write. Or we could go back to our back-end code and look at our models and open the movies-go file, and we could take this movie struct and write a custom JSON decoder and encoder. In other words, a custom marshal and a custom unmarshal function, and extend the actual decoding or encoding of JSON, but that's an awful lot of work, and we'll run into a lot of headaches trying to do that. So it seems to me the simplest thing to do here is to go back to our handlers and close this terminal window, and let's define a new type. So I'll put the type right outside of this function in case I need to use it somewhere else. And I'll call this type movie payload. And it will just be a struct. And I'll give it the same fields as our movie type. So ID, but this time I'll make it a string because that's what I'm getting from my JSON payload. And in JSON that's called ID. And I'll duplicate that a few times. And the second entry would be the title. And in JSON that's called title, all lowercase. And next is description. And that's called description, all lowercase. And then we have the year, which is year. Actually, that's not coming from JSON, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. Then we have the release date, which is called release date. And I'll duplicate that again. Then we have runtime, called runtime. And rating, which is called rating. And finally, MPAA rating, which is called MPAA rating, like that. And I'll format this. Now I'll rename this movie variable to payload, just so I know what I'm dealing with. And it's not of type models movie, it's going to be of type movie payload. And down here, I'll just rename this variable to correspond to the actual one we're decoding it into. And now, down here, I'll log.println payload.title. And I'll save this to clean up the imports. And I'll stop the application and start it. And give myself a few blank lines. And now when I go back to my web browser and save it this time, clear the console, we should not get an error. And we don't. And if we look at our terminal in our IDE, we actually have the title. So now I've successfully read my payload, my JSON payload, into my temporary variable called payload. So at this point, all I really have to do is now declare a movie variable, var movie, of type models.movie. And I'll just assign all of the content from my payload struct into my movie struct, doing the type conversions as necessary. Now I'm going to do this without checking for errors, just to save some time, because I'm sure you know how to check for errors in Go. So the ID will be use the strconf package, a2i, and we're going to get payload.id. And then we get the title, and that's just a string, so movie.string, or movie.title equals payload.title. And the description matches description. And then the year, movie.year. Actually, I'll do movie.release date. Movie.release date, and I'll ignore the error, is equal to time.parse. And what I'm getting is the ISO standard format, so I'll use Go's rules for matching a date pattern. And that comes from payload.release date. Now I'll do the year. Movie.year is equal to movie.release date .year. And now I'll get the runtime, movie.runtime. And that needs to be an int, so I'll use the strconf package again, a2i payload.runtime. And after that I get the rating, so that's just the rating. And that has to be in an int format. And the last thing I need to worry about right now, reading from the JSON, is movie.mpaa rating, and that's equal to payload.mpaa rating. And then movie.createdAt will be equal to time.now. And movie.updatedAt is equal to time.now. And at this point, we're almost ready to write to the database, but let's make sure it worked. Log.println will say movie.year, because that's when we're converting from one format to another. We're actually parsing the release date from a string into a time.time, and the year we're getting from our release date in the movie variable. So this should work. So let's stop our application, start it again, and go back to our terminal, or to our web browser, and just click Save. So no errors, and now in the console, I should see the year 2021. Perfect. Okay, so the next step, of course, is to write this to the database. So we'll close our terminal window, and we'll open up our movies-db.go file where we have all of our database routines. So we have a get, we have an all. Let's keep going and find out where we want to put this. We'll put it right at the very end. We'll just create a new function, func, and it has the receiver of a pointer to DB model, and we'll call it insert movie. And it will take one parameter, movie, of type movie, and it returns potentially an error. Now I'll just go up and copy the context stuff to save some typing, and come down here and paste it in. And let's write our statement. Statement is assigned the value of, and it's very straightforward. Insert into movies, and we want to insert title, description, year, release date, runtime, rating, MPAA rating, and I'll go to the next line. Created at, and updated at, and we're going to get these values. We just put in our placeholders, and we have, it looks like 9. So $1, $2, $3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And close our parentheses. So that looks right. Now, let's ignore the first return item, but check for the error. And we call m.db.execContext. Hand it the context, hand it our statement, and now we just put in all of our entries. So movie.title, and I'll duplicate that a few times. The second one is the description, then the year, then the release date, then runtime, rating, try that again, rating, and duplicate that, MPAA rating, created at, and updated at. We check for an error. If error is not equal to nil, return error. Otherwise, return nil. So now we go back to our movie handlers, and at this point, right here, we'll check for an error is equal to app.models.db.insertMovie, and we hand it movie. And again, we'll check for our error, so I'll copy this check for the error and paste it right below that. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I have this JSON response type, and it's specific to this function, and I'm actually going to change that. So I'll cut this, and at the top of the file I'll define that type, and I'll paste it in here. And I'm going to add one field to it, and I'll call it message of type string, and in JSON I'll call that message. Let's go back down here to our edit movie function and just clean up some of this stuff. So that should be gone. We don't need that anymore. And we don't need that anymore. And that all looks right. So now I should be able to start my application, go back to my web browser, clear the console, and let's put an actual movie in here. So I'll put in, say, The Princess Bride, which was released in 1987. So I'll find 1987, a long time ago, in October. And it was on the 9th. And no, I don't have that information at my disposal. I did, in fact, look it up. And its runtime is 98 minutes. And it's PG. And its rating, that's a 5-star movie. And I copied and pasted the description, so let me paste it in there. And let's save this and see what happens. And we have an error message. So let's go back and check our error messages. And it probably is in movies-db. Insert into movies. Ah, missing a comma. That's what it is. I do that all the time. So let's try that again. Stop it, start it. And go back to my web browser. And clear the console. And try it one more time. Save. And we still have an error. So let's try this. log.println. I think it's probably here. Undoubtedly a typographical error somewhere. One more time. Save. We should still get the error. Operator does not exist. Integer. Look at that. Don't know how that happened. I guess I'm getting sloppy in my old age. Third time is the charm. Let's try this again. Save. That looks better. So now if I go to movies, I should see The Princess Bride and be able to click on it. Perfect. Okay, a little bit of sloppy typing there, but we finally got the job done. So the next step is to actually allow us to edit an existing movie. And we can use this same function in our handlers. We'll just have to have a different database function. Instead of calling insert movie, we'll call update movie. And we can do the check based upon the ID that we get from the request. So if our ID is 0, we're adding a movie. If our ID is not 0, then we're updating an existing movie. And we'll get started on that in the next lecture.